In 5008, deep in the mountains of Guizhou, Wang Yangming formulated a rule. By the end of this video, you will possess 5 laws of action to eliminate chronic overthinking. 41 unread research reports sit in your inbox. 3 open notebooks lie on your desk filled with strategic outlines. Why do intelligent people spend years preparing for a life they never execute? You believe you have an information deficit. You tell yourself that with one more book, one more framework, or one more quarter of analysis, you will finally possess the certainty required to move. But certainty never arrives. Instead, analysis expands to fill the space created by hesitation. As a result, you remain frozen at your desk, mistaking the consumption of theory for real capability. Step into a corporate headquarters at 9 in the morning. A senior strategist sits before a glass whiteboard covered in complex execution models. He has spent 6 months analyzing competitor behavior and projecting quarterly scenarios. He speaks with total fluency on market dynamics. Yet when the strategic window opens, he delays. He requests another feasibility study. He convenes another advisory committee. Because his intellect has been trained to analyze without consequences, he cannot bear the friction of an uncalculated outcome. 6 weeks later, a decisive competitor captures the territory while he is still refining his diagrams. The critical leverage point is this: overthinking is not an intellectual problem. Rather, it is a psychological defense mechanism where the mind uses planning to insulate itself from real-world consequences. Hold that mechanism in your mind. In a moment, we will see how Wang Yangming applied this exact doctrine to crush an armed rebellion in 41 days. We will come back to this tactical framework across 5 laws, and that is where the first law begins. To understand why Wang Yangming's doctrine is uncompromising, look at the crucible where it was forged. In 1506, Wang Yangming stood in the imperial court of Beijing and denounced the corrupt chief eunuch Lu Jin. He was publicly flogged with 40 heavy batons, stripped of his rank, and banished to Longchang, a disease-ridden mountain outpost in southwest China. Assassins pursued him along the river routes. At Longchang, surrounded by hostile terrain and toxic vapors, Yangming did not write poetry or seek consolation. Instead, he carved a stone sarcophagus and lived beside it, meditating day and night on one question: what does a master do when all external comfort and security are stripped away? One night in 1508, the answer struck him with total clarity: the unity of knowing and acting. Yangming realized that knowledge and action are not 2 separate steps in a sequence. Knowledge is not a theory you formulate in safety and then apply later. Yangming recorded, "Knowledge is the beginning of action. Action is the completion of knowledge. To claim you know something while failing to execute it is simply ignorance." Years later, when appointed supreme commander against the Prince of Ning's massive army, Yangming did not wait for imperial reinforcements. He mobilized local militias, struck enemy supply depots without warning, and ended the civil war in 41 days. Slow down here and notice what happens when you remove the barrier between thought and deed. Keep that tactical foundation in mind as we proceed. Watch what happens next as we deconstruct the first law. The first law of the Tactical Codex eliminates theoretical comfort. Knowledge does not precede action. Knowledge exists only at the point of execution. Modern culture trains you to treat knowledge like inventory. You accumulate certificates, read manuals, and collect data, believing you are becoming more capable. Wang Yangming rejected this completely. He offered a blunt analogy. Consider a person who claims to know that a fire is hot. If they reach out their hand, touch the flame, and pull back in pain, they know fire. But if a person talks eloquently about thermodynamics while casually resting their hand on burning coals, they know nothing. Notice the difference between the theorist and the sovereign strategist. The theorist treats knowledge as an intellectual possession. They say, "I know what needs to be done, but I am waiting for the optimal conditions." The sovereign strategist understands that knowledge without execution is merely noise. If you know that a business move is required but remain motionless, you have not comprehended the move. Real knowledge alters behavior immediately. Consider a modern market entry decision. You can analyze customer demographic charts for 6 months in a conference room, but until you put a real product in front of a real buyer and ask for capital, you know 0 facts about that market. Everything before the transaction is pure hallucination. If you find value in these uncompromising tactical breakdowns, take a moment to subscribe and swim with us at MindKoi. Here is the operational rule for Law 1. Never allow yourself to say you understand a discipline until your hands have executed it under real stakes. That is the first of 5 laws. More on that when we examine the second law. What comes next in the second law exposes why excessive planning is actually disguised cowardice. Planning that does not immediately result in action is not strategy. It is avoidance disguised as diligence. In the second law, Wang Yangming attacked the chronic habit of endless preparation. When people feel fear regarding a difficult venture, they rarely admit they are afraid. Instead, they elevate their fear into an intellectual virtue. They call it due diligence, comprehensive research, or risk mitigation. Yangming saw through this maneuver completely. He warned that dividing the mind between a planning phase and an execution phase creates a dangerous cognitive delay. While you are refining your theoretical blueprint in an office, the operational landscape shifts beneath your feet. Step into a corporate product development meeting. A team spends 40 weeks building comprehensive roadmaps and projection models for a software platform. Because they refuse to launch an imperfect version, they delay deployment. Meanwhile, a lean startup launches a crude prototype in 2 weeks, gathers real user feedback, and captures the entire market segment. Here is the operational rule for Law 2. Treat the first tactical move not as the end of planning, but as the primary research tool. Action generates the data that makes accurate strategy possible. That is the second of 5 laws. Before we get to the third law, remember that comfort destroys operational capability, and that is where the third law begins. Quiet meditation and isolation creates fragile intellect. You must polish your capability in the friction of real events. In the third law, Yangming introduced his core principle, polishing oneself through practical affairs. Many scholars of Yangming's era argued that true wisdom required retreating to mountain monasteries to preserve mental purity away from politics and commerce. Yangming opposed them vigorously. He argued that a mind cultivated only in quiet isolation will instantly shatter the moment it encounters conflict, greed, or danger. Notice the master's stance under pressure. The theorist seeks a calm environment so their mind can remain peaceful. The master uses high-stakes operational friction as the grindstone for their character. When managing logistical chaos, insubordination, or market volatility, they do not complain about the disturbance. Rather, they recognize that the disturbance is the training ground. Step into a high-stakes executive boardroom during a hostile corporate takeover. The amateur complains about the hostility and loses composure, but the seasoned operator uses the pressure to test their positioning, identify weaknesses in the opposing counsel, and execute countermeasures with total emotional control. Pay attention to this diagnostic. Do not look for an easy operating environment. Instead, seek the exact operational friction that forces your execution to become precise and unshakable. That is the third of 5 laws. Later in this video, we will see why intellectual models often blind leaders to obvious reality. What happens next in the fourth law dismantles over-intellectualization. When intellectual models multiply endlessly, cut through the noise with direct perception, the fourth law restores operational clarity. In his mature philosophy, Wang Yangming identified the concept of innate, direct knowing. He observed that when people face a complex dilemma, their intellect immediately manufactures hundreds of theoretical rules, precedents, and justifications. The more they analyze, the more ambiguous the situation appears. This is where the trap is sprung. The intellect loves complexity because complexity justifies inaction. As long as the model is incomplete, you have an excuse to remain safely on the sidelines. Yangming taught that true discernment operates like a clear mirror. When an object appears before a polished mirror, the mirror does not calculate or debate. It reflects the object instantly and accurately. Consider a modern corporate ethical dilemma in a boardroom. A leadership team spends 2 months consulting compliance lawyers to see if an aggressive accounting loophole is technically permissible. They produce a 300-page brief justifying the maneuver. Yet every person in the room knew within the first 10 seconds that the move was dishonest. The analysis was merely an expensive mechanism to silence their innate judgment. Here is the operational rule for Law 4. Strip away the excessive frameworks. When making a strategic decision, identify the single core operational reality and act on it without theoretical hesitation. That is the fourth of 5 laws. I will explain how execution acts as the ultimate filter of human truth in a moment. The final law is what brings this entire codex together. In the final law of the codex, all theory submits to reality. Execution is the only objective filter of capability. The world is full of individuals who possess impeccable credentials, sophisticated rhetoric, and flawless theoretical models. Yet when placed in command of a real operation with real consequences, their structures collapse under the first contact with reality. Wang Yangming judged men by a single metric, not what they promised in the palace, but what they delivered on the battlefield. Notice the ultimate division between words and deeds. The weak person relies on reputation, intentions, and explanations. When they fail to execute, they offer sophisticated justifications for why external circumstances prevented their success. The sovereign operator takes full accountability for the outcome. They understand that reality does not negotiate with explanations. If the result was not achieved, the execution was deficient. In modern business and strategy, look at executed track records, not verbal presentations. Ignore what people say they intend to build. Watch what they actually deploy into the market. Reality honors only the weight of executed decisions. Here is the operational rule for Law 5. Hold yourself to the standard of the sovereign operator. Measure your value by what you have brought into physical reality, never by what you intended to do. That is the 5th of 5 laws. The question of authentic capability gets answered last, and it deserves to. You do not overcome overthinking through more thinking. You overcome overthinking by eliminating the distance between thought and deed. Stop treating knowledge as a collection of ideas. Knowledge is a weapon of execution. Remember the 5 laws. 1. Knowledge exists only at the point of action. 2. Eliminate the artificial split between planning and moving. 3. Polish your capability in the friction of real affairs. 4. Cut through paralyzing models with direct perception. 5. Measure truth solely by executed reality. Choose the one objective you have been overanalyzing for months. Put down the books, close the theoretical models, and execute the first decisive move today.